The future applications are going to be messy. With agentic AI, you're going to be
Yeah.
querying, and it's going to kick off access to multiple LLMs all over the place where your data is, and then bring that back to a point. And it's probably not going to be text based. It's going to be multimodal. It's
Yeah.
going to be at the
Yeah.
edge, and that's going to require a different kind of thinking about the edge and the network.
Good morning, Neil. How are
Hey,
you?
good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited, to kind of like chat with you. We've been working together now for a while on the summit. We've done a lot, we got a lot coming up, but I thought it would be really good to introduce you to the broader community so everybody knows that you're a co-chair and how much impact you have had on the program as we've been developing it over the last 6 months, for not just, the spring program that's happening at the end of May, but also like for the fall program, as well. So why don't we start off, Neil? Like I know a good amount of your background, but not a lot of people do. So let's spend some time with you talking about your background, kind of like where you've been and what your career journey kind of looks like, and what you do at WWT. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll start in reverse. So at WWT, I'm responsible for all of our networking business, our cloud business, our data center business, our AI solutions, which is super hot, and our automation business. So I've been here about 10 years. Prior to WWT, I spent about 14 years at Cisco, actually one of the co-founders of the Cisco Validated Design program, the CVD program, which is
Oh,
widely popular.
yeah.
And prior to that, spent quite a bit of time in the cellular industry at Ericsson. So I've been around. I've worked with service provider customers, mobility, cellular. Worked a lot with networking, obviously, and now I work with a lot of different technologies, including AI. So I've been around longer than I care to admit, Nick.
Hey, I'm there with you, Neil. I'm actually might have been around a little bit longer, but anyway, no, that's a great career path. I think we might have interacted a little bit while you were at Cisco, not that much, not as much as we've been working together at WWT, which has really been super. So I think so let's go a little bit more into WWT. So it's like clearly you have kind of cloud, you got or cloud infrastructure, you have kind of data center, and you have the AI piece. And you also have the lab too,
Mhm.
and I think that's where it all comes together. So let's give everybody a sense of how big that lab is because it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, our Advanced Technology Center, we refer to it as the ATC, pretty much is the center of our world at Worldwide. Our co-founders and owners who are still here today decided like it was an amazing investment for our customers. So it's tough to estimate the value of it, but we're just like tracking the list price of that lab. It's well over $1 billion investment for us.
Hmm.
You're talking about tens of thousands of VMs for our on-demand labs. Um, it started out with a sort of a single rack. I remember when I was at Cisco and I first
Uh-huh.
saw the ATC, and they were super proud of it. It was like 5 racks in a closet. Now we're
Uh-huh.
talking about 6 different data centers, Equinix space, to so that we can approximate, and show customers like what's it going to look like if you're doing things across the cloud, and it's also very cloud connected with our top cloud providers, and so the point of it is really to help customers make decisions on technology, to be able to show them realistic traffic flows, realistic environments where it's not a single vendor. It's you want to see what's this going to do, what's flow is going to do through your network, through your firewall, through your load balancing technology out to the cloud. And so it's been an amazing investment. One of the top reasons I came to WWT is like I
Hmm.
was doing had really large labs at Cisco, but the ability to actually show customers a true approximation of their architecture,
Yeah.
it's unparalleled to me in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's huge, especially over this last two business cycles, right? So um, kind of think about kind of the enterprise cloud space really was around, really kicking off around 2013, maybe
Mhm.
2014, timeframe. And even to this day, there are still difficulties that companies have with design patterns. What's the right design pattern, for cloud consumption? And it's interesting. So, and now, as we're into the AI space, so let me see if I can kind of concatenate, these two, topics,
Hmm.
Neil. So, within the ONU community, we're really focused around kind of multi-cloud and hybrid cloud.
Hmm.
Because everybody knew there's got to be this connection between on-prem and off-prem, and so how does that control panel work? How does policy work across there? How do you do connectivity? All of those. How do you manage that? Space. So there was a lot of focus around that. And the large enterprise, like now, if you were a cloud first company, then no problem. You're just in the cloud like all the time. Or
Yes.
unless you do an Intuit, where you just go all in and you basically start to shut down your own data centers and then you kind of put everything into the cloud.
Hmm.
But those are more newer companies are clearly more cloud oriented. Established large enterprises clearly have infrastructure, they have resources, they have 10,000 applications, what have you, and so there needs to be that connectivity. And it seems to be that's becoming even more and more important now with AI because
Hmm.
of the cost of the AI infrastructure is so expensive that you have to be in very specific industry sectors that can justify a massive kind of investment
Yep.
within AI infrastructure. And then you have the developers that want to leverage all the AI tools that Google and Microsoft and Amazon and others have been investing in and investing in really heavily. So anyway, so I think so really the question is more to you. Didn't mean to kind of pontificate, so much, but like, what are you seeing in terms of like customers asking for what kinds of kind of design patterns? Have you been more focused on these days based upon what you're hearing?
Yeah, it's amazing. When I first started working in our Advanced Technology Center, our ATC labs, I thought, surely this will be for smaller customers who don't have the means to, test these kinds of things themselves and validate these
Uh,
architectures themselves. But what I found, very quickly was like this is the largest of the large organizations on the planet that just
yeah,
they struggle to do this themselves for different reasons. It
yeah,
could be intellectual property protection. You want to they want to pilot a new technology like a Zscaler or something, right, for SSE, and it's very difficult, turns out, to do that in their own environments. And so they come to us and they have an air gapped environment. They can test these things end to end, right? They can
mm,
test the on premise network, the endpoints, all the way to the cloud and applications, and they could do that much more rapidly than they can do it themselves.
yeah,
And just when we move to the AI world, it's even more difficult. Like these environments for AI are complex.
mm,
Your data could be in one place. Where you want to run GPUs to act on that data could be in another place. And so it's definitely, I think you touched on it, Nick, like it's a hybrid cloud world.
yeah,
Most of our customers are using multiple clouds, as well
yeah,
as tremendous on-premise data center that they have themselves, and they're trying to bridge these things together. They're trying to understand, like, what do I have, where's my data, how do I act upon it, how do I get access to the latest AI technology, whether that's GPUs or high performance networking, which is
yeah,
hugely important to feed those GPUs. It's just a complicated stack, and so we've been very fortunate to be able to to partner with the top people in the industry, like Nvidia, like Cisco and others,
yeah,
and be able to pull these things together for customers and show them, all right, this is what it's going to look like. You may start out in the cloud, and that may be good for you for certain use cases. Others, you may have intellectual property concerns and you want to run that in your own data center, and so we can show them what's that going to look like. And
yeah,
what's amazing is data center power cooling cabling has, I mean, it's not that sexy, Nick, like, let's be honest,
yeah,
but in AI, it is hugely important. So we can
yeah,
show them, like, what's the thermal profile of that stack going to look like in your data center? And that's hugely
yeah.
important for, especially for AI.
Yeah, yeah. These are, And so that's interesting. So it's like, it just makes it kind of resonates with everything we've been hearing, from the community. It's like we're kind of into in the large enterprise kind of petabyte networks. All right. So like, these networks are supporting petabytes of data daily. All right. And
Hmm.
so, and then the kind of data gravity is shifting all over the place as they start to actually consume and utilize, AI. So it's not just like, the data gravity is in on-prem and in the cloud. It's now moving
Right.
to the edge. Now it's also like, as you were mentioning too, it's that, where is the data? Where are the GPUs? And so like, there are all these like eddy currents and
Hmm.
these Brownian motion of traffic that's occurring that they're really scratching their head. Like, how do we build an infrastructure to really kind of support that, today. So having this lab, I think, I'm sure that's why there's a lot of interest in it, because like
Yes.
this is really a lot of unknown territory for the industry, and everyone's trying to like get an understanding of like, okay, where is the landing plane? Where are the design patterns? Like, what's the control mechanisms, for this? So we're really kind of building out a new stack. And on the power side of it, absolutely right. It's like, you,
Hmm.
let me tie a couple of things together and get your reaction, Neil. So, David Sachs, kind of the AI czar over at the White House, he had, pretty interesting talk the other day, and he was talking about like really how exponential AI is, and everybody kind of understand who's been in the industry kind of understands
Hmm.
that this is coming out as fast. The numbers that David presented to me, well, as I started to internalize them, I started to say, "Holy shit!" It's like, wow, this is really coming fast. So the numbers are there. So he broke it down into like algorithms, chips, and then also compute. All right, and each one of those components are growing between 3 to 4x improvements per year, which means that in each one of them, they're basically growing in an order of magnitude in 2 years, two orders of magnitude, right? 100x
Hmm.
in 4 years.
Right.
So if we then look at the data centers, which we were just talking about, right? So last year we had Colossal from XAI, about 300,000 GP or about 100,000 GPUs, about 150 megawatt, data center. They're quickly going to 300,000 this year. So that's the 3 to 4x. And they're talking about 300 megawatts, But then you think about, okay, what does a 10x look like and a 100x? So like in 2 years, we're talking like 3 million GPUs. We're talking about a 3 gigawatt,
Yeah.
and I follow Elon's like tweets, and like they're starting to think about terawatt data centers. Like these are outrageous numbers, especially when you consider like a gigawatt is about all the power that the city of Denver consumes. You know, so it's I've been internalizing these numbers, and part of me is like, wow, that is like, that's exciting. I can't believe like, like all the good that's going to come out from that. And then the other side of me is like, how do we do that? It's like, how does that get built? And then let's assume that those trend lines, those exponential curves continue. Then you kind of think, wow. Um, so we have these massive AI data centers. Is that kind of the Ross Perot sucking sound, where like a lot of IT applications get rewritten because we can now, because of agentic. It's not like the lift and shift that we had in the cloud era, which is a huge amount of like time and expense to kind of take an application that's private,
Hmm.
lift it, shift it over to the cloud, rewrite it. Now with agentic coming on, it's like coding should be easier, and that to rewrite them and to put them into that AI data center. So anyway, so Neil, so that was the context. Kind of what's your thinking, what's your view like on how this is unfolding, and also how is WWT kind of helping the large enterprises kind of navigate this stuff? I'm sure they may not be thinking about it in those terms. It's like, but they will pretty soon.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, most people are shocked at first, right? When you think about Jensen was on stage at their conference at GTC a couple months ago and was talking about, 1 megawatt racks,
Mm,
right? Like today,
yeah,
people are thinking about, most data centers are wired for 17, 20 kilowatt racks.
yeah,
And with even the latest AI that's available today, it's 10x that. You're talking about 170, 100 or 200 kilowatt racks.
yeah,
And Jensen's on stage talking about the need for megawatt racks. And
yeah.
that was, I remember when he said that, and like you could hear a pin drop because
Mm,
most people are thinking about like what does that look like, right?
yeah,
And and then you also touched on something very interesting, which is most applications, you sort of need to rethink this. Every application is now going to be able to access AI as almost as a service, right?
yeah,
And so every application that we know is going to be rewritten essentially to take advantage of AI.
yeah,
And for years, I mean, AI has been around for a long time. We've been doing it for 10 plus years. But the availability of it in every application is new, right? And thinking about that as almost how do I bring my data to life and be able to do things like ask questions to my data
mm,
or have data serve up a new type of application experience, right?
yeah,
And so that's a huge thing. And you also mentioned about sort of like looking at the architecture of the network is hugely important. I mean, we're all focused on, and all the marketing hype's been around kind of generative AI, right?
right, right,
Which, it's amazing, right? You sort of ask a question in text and it goes to your data center and you get back an amazing response if your data's right.
yeah,
But the applications that we're looking at with customers are things that are like computer vision or digital humans
yeah,
that are going to require edge processing where you
mm,
cannot, really afford the latency back to, sort of home run that those packets back to your central data center. It's interesting because AI has kind of, it's kind of nice and tidy in your data center, right?
yeah,
And you can query it and your data's there and you get a great experience and you're amazed. Oh my God, look at what it came back in my chatbot, right? But the
yeah,
future applications are going to be messy. With agentic AI, you're going to be
yeah,
querying and it's going to kick off access to multiple LLMs all over the place where your data is, and then bring that back to a point. And it's probably not going to be text based. It's going to be multimodal. It's
yeah,
going to be at the
yeah,
edge. And that's going to require a different kind of thinking about the edge and the network.
yeah. Yeah, I'm so with you. I think there's like I think we're kind of into kind of a new era around rethinking and reimagining really what infrastructure is. And not just in the large enterprise, but really just computing, period. And the edge is really, an important point, that you raise. You're right. It's like the bandwidth isn't there to really, to be able to kind of like move data from like some faraway place into your GPUs, to kind of like move them back again, right? So it's like, and so we have these constraints around latency, we have these constraints around power, and normally when we had those constraints, we had the freedom with networking to be able to move, separate like storage and and compute into these different spaces, in order, and the user experience would still be good. Now it seems like we just really need to kind of re-up the amount of bandwidth and then also just reallocate computing in lots of different spaces that we normally wouldn't be putting them. Yeah, right. It's like move compute, move AI closer to like where the data is, and not rely so much on networking to kind of move things back and forth. We still need super high performance networking. I think the networking pieces of itself will become more and more automated, which is
Mhm.
really actually goes into like the agentic piece again, right? So it's like one thing that we've been doing in the industry for the last like 30 years is it's been kind of the haystack model, right? Where we have all these emitters and they emit all this state data and all these logs, and we centralize them. We put them into Splunk, or we put them into like Snowflake, or Datadog, S3 buckets, into data lakes. And then an incident happens, right? And that incident can generate, tens of thousands of alerts, and then that's almost like somebody taking a needle and throwing it into that haystack, and then kind of the engineers, the knock and the sock, someone tells them, go find that needle in there, and they have to go through huge data sets to kind of find that. It seems that with agentic and having agents local, all across the devices, networking and security devices, then we can start doing more local processing, of that, and be able to find root cause a lot quicker, and also to eliminate almost like the cascading effect, that we have when an incident does occur. So I don't know. Are you seeing, so a couple of different things, is I kind of touched on. One was kind of a new way to do lifecycle management of infrastructure, and then the other is really just what are some of the thinking around networking. I do have an idea around that, but I'd love for you to share your ideas around, where do we see networking happening or evolving in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, so starting with lifecycle, what we tell customers is, look, it's never been more important to, refresh your infrastructure, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to take advantage of AI, right?
Mm,
First of all, the telemetry, the capabilities, it's just new, right? And so all of our partners like a Cisco and everybody, they're building it into their infrastructure today. And
yeah,
so you're going to have access to that, first of all. The second thing is, you nailed it. Like the amount of data coming out of these networks is tremendous. And
mm,
for years we've had kind of, I call it islands of data, right? Where we've
yeah,
had, oh, you can see what's happening here, you can see what's happening there. But the ability to correlate that, and and be able to understand, like, what did I do the last 5 times to remediate a problem,
mm,
that's new, right?
yeah,
And it takes a tremendous amount of AI processing to do. So one of the top use cases, like, everybody's focused on, kind of these use cases that you see in the news for ROI. I'm like, oh, it's amazing. Like, look at this chatbot. Look what I can do with AI. But it's not as amazingly sexy as that. But, like, the top use case we're building for customers, Nick, is what I call the knock copilot, right?
yeah,
The
mm,
ability to ingest your incident data and your
yeah,
resolution data
mm,
on top of whatever network architecture you have, and then being able to uplift the knowledge of every agent in that knock to a new level, because they can understand, like, what the 20-year experienced knock you know guy did to fix that problem,
yeah,
right? It's now available to you. And so imagine a knock agent, like, sitting on your shoulder, that can say, oh, we've seen that problem 5 times, here was the most common resolution of that. It just really uplifts the capability to resolution, like we've never seen before. And so
wow, mm,
it's not available out of the box from most of the major infrastructure providers. We're building that custom for a bunch of customers in every vertical. That's the thing, is, like, you think
yeah,
about, everybody's fascinated with kind of like the vertical use cases, like life science drug research, or
right, yeah,
what can I do in retail, or what can I do in a hospital. But
yeah,
a knock agent, like, everybody needs that.
yeah,
Everybody has a network infrastructure, right? Everybody needs to cut their resolution time.
yeah,
And so you've nailed it. Like, that's one of the top use cases we're seeing and building for every one of our customers.
yeah. No, it's great. It's like it makes so much sense, because what we were talking about before is like traffic patterns are changing, latency requirements are changing. We used to think of traffic in terms of north, south, east, west. It's becoming more Brownian motion, kind of all over the place. And so I think in order to really design these networks better, the first place you got to start with is the life cycle management. Because there are so many different anomalies that are going to get created with these new kinds of traffic patterns that you need a really automated life cycle, management system in place. So, that makes, perfect sense that that's what you're hearing and that's what you're working on. Because like, if you can have like a level one engineer all of a sudden acting like a level three engineer, because they have access to all of this past data, and then also the system gets smarter and smarter all the time. It takes so much time when an incident occurs, to get everybody just on the same page. It's like, okay, oh, we got to get the storage people, we got to get the server people, we got to get the application people, we got to get the networking people, we're the security people. That process in itself, can take hours, just to get everybody like on a Zoom call, and then there's the forensics. Being able to kind of like drastically reduce that time is huge, is absolutely huge to the uptime and the reliability, of that infrastructure. And then I think, with a lot of confidence in that, then we can really just start working about how do we now design, what's the new design for networks. So we know speed is going to increase. We know like we're going like 800 gigabit, Ethernet, like 1.6 terabit, Ethernet. That's in the data center. The wide area, I think, really needs a lot of attention, today. I don't know. Have you seen any interesting kind of new approaches to the wide area?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you nailed it. We were talking about earlier about kind of like AI experiences at the edge.
Yeah,
It's one thing to be able to send text data to a chatbot back in your data center, right? And you're going to get great response out of that. But some of these use cases, you think about like computer vision, being able to use video cameras to do interesting things at the edge. Digital human, which is one of the things that we've brought to life. So you can, imagine you can talk to an LLM in multiple languages and it answers in your own language, right? And it's a
hmm.
human-like experience. Um, that takes, you can't really, home run that traffic to your data center. That takes
Yeah,
edge processing. And when you combine that with agentic AI, the you know the days of you're sending a query, a prompt to a single LLM engine, that's kind of over, right?
yeah, hmm,
What we've done and what we're doing for a lot of customers is, agentic AI means that a prompt that you enter or some interaction that you have is going to very likely have to access multiple LLMs in that have access to different data sources all over the place.
yeah,
And so imagine this cascade of, somebody at the edge asks something or is talking to a digital human, or there's a computer vision camera that's trying to interpret something. And there's a cascade underneath that goes out to multiple LLMs and then brings back and aggregates a response back to, hey, I've seen that before on the camera. This is what that means. Or, hey, this is the question this person asked of a digital human, and this is the answer. Like, it's no longer single prompt to single LLM.
yeah,
Your prompt or whatever interaction gets broken down into multiple things that kind of fly out to multiple places and then brings back an aggregated response. Like that's agentic AI. That's the new world. So you
yeah,
think about the network infrastructure, like it's not ready to handle that in most
hmm,
cases. It was never designed for
for
that.
sure. Yeah,
East, west, north, south. I'm used to those terms, but I don't even know what to call it, Nick. It's like a web of all of that at the same time, being able to access your data wherever it is and bring back that response in a real time, manner. We, of course, we uplifted all of our infrastructure for real time, for voice, video, and all of that.
yeah.
But this is going to take that to a new level.
This is like really different. It's like I'm totally with you, Neil. It's like we were kind of more on a linear path. It's like you can think of maybe step functions sometimes, like with video and also with voice. Um, but those were predictable patterns, that we can kind of build to. This is we're a little bit of an unknown. I tell you, when you're talking though around the edge, and those particular use cases, the first what the image that comes into my mind is that we're now entering into an era where we really need to have computing kind of all around kind of an edge, right? So closer to users, closer to where the data is, and we're basically sharing results, back and forth. And so I tell you, the one architecture, and I'm not saying like this is the no big light bulb over my head, but it reminds me of a discussion I had with Parentap over at eBay, or Pablo Espinosa over at IBM, um, and Snehal over at Walmart, and where those folks are really looking at Sonic in the core of their network. So they're kind of thinking, keep the kind of the core, and with an extension, the wide area, as well, um, fat and flat is what they kind of use, and then you have a lot of intelligence and AI all around it. Um, it's an interesting approach, and maybe that's like one of the approaches that people could start to think about. Because I think it's WWT is in a great position, right, to like being able to show what are the various different options and choices that we have in order to start really building to take advantage of this new AI world that we're all in, and that's coming at us at a pace that I don't believe we really understand. Like, humans don't think in exponential terms; we think more linearly, And so, um, anyway, so have you seen other kinds of architectures, or even the kind of the core being more simple, and then having more intelligence and more AI around the edges?
Yeah, and I think a couple of things there. First of all, um, new approaches to things. I think you're exactly right. Like these things like voice and video on the network were kind of understood step functions, right? We understood what's it going to take to run voice on the network because it was very quantifiable, right?
Yeah,
Video, same thing. Yeah, initially like high def video over the network was kind of crazy. It was like, oh my god, we're going to need gigabit networks, and then we realized like, well, there's ways to optimize that with codecs down to again a quantifiable measure. But
yeah,
AI is almost unquantifiable. The
yeah,
effect it's going to have on the infrastructure. I think you nailed it. And then so that's one sort of dimension of it is customers ask us what do I need for a network? And it's almost impossible to answer today,
yeah,
except for you're going to need to be faster. I love that fatter and flatter. Like that,
yeah,
that's a good way to characterize it. You're going to need a lot of
yeah,
bandwidth, and you're going to need it, to push that compute and everything out to edges. It's just
yeah,
and your network is going to become a high speed essential fabric. It's not about
yeah,
like connecting you to corporate or you to cloud anymore. It's about how you serve up data, universally. So that's one thing. And I think, another aspect of that you touched on is the architecture. It's tough. You know, there's no one, and I think everybody's realizing this, or at least the smart partners that we work with,
mm,
like the NVIDIAs and the Ciscos and others, they're realizing that, look, no one in the industry can solve this problem alone.
yeah,
We have to work together. We have to form partnerships in IT like we've never seen before to bring these things to life because it really takes a village. It takes an
mm,
amazing stack of technology to solve this that no one has themselves. They have to rely on partnerships to bring this to life. So you see these partnerships going on between like pure networking, Cisco and Nvidia bringing this to life, a whole AI experience. Like I've never seen anything like it, Nick, where they
mm.
have to lean on each other. No one alone can solve this problem in the industry.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like we are, as we kind of mentioned this earlier, like we're in this rethinking and reimagining what infrastructure looks like, and the whole supply chain is now being engaged to problem solve, on this, you know. But I do have a model for, I think, or maybe somewhat of a vision for like what the infrastructure, maybe not so much what it looks like, but maybe what it does. Like, I think one part is that we've moved away from the thinking of a network as connectivity, and you had mentioned this, as well, Neil. It's like It's not so much we're just connecting for like, text and email and voice and video and connecting all these desktops and laptops together. But now I'm thinking more and more of a network as kind of a data exchange, so we're moving away from kind of connecting things and more around how do we more effectively move data, especially as that data moves into the petabyte and above range. So it's like, how does that data kind of move, from the applications to the compute processing, to the storage, to the users, to the applications that are requiring, that data. And I think the real focus should be really more around kind of this exchange, or thinking about a network, as a kind of a secure infrastructure for the exchange of data, that is, widely spread out. And I think as we start to think about that, then it's no longer, and you alluded to this as well, Neil, is that when we think about the lifecycle management of it, the industry has delivered solutions in silos. So you would only see pieces, of that infrastructure. And I would take it even one step further. The industry, for the last 3 decades, has delivered products in silos. These are data center products. These are wide area networking products. These are Wi-Fi products, remote branch office products. I really think that those days are numbered, and that we're really kind of like, there are going to be products to feed the exchange, and that, there's an exchange architecture that we're all now starting to think about, and to try to understand how we can best build an infrastructure for corporations to take advantage of this massive amount of value creation, and efficiency that's going to come from this technology. So I don't know. That's my, 2-bit, view of, I think, where the industry is going. If you got another view, please share.
No, I think you're dead on. And I love the characterization that you made about, the network becomes a data exchange fabric,
Mm.
right? That's
Um,
exactly right. It's going to be about moving data and prompts, responses from all these agents out there to where do I need that, that intelligence. And we're living in amazing times, but
mm,
I don't know that we're prepared for some of that, right? It's going to be tough. How do I move data from here to there, move it from wherever I'm storing the data to the GPUs where I'm trying to process the data? Sometimes that, again, like I think today, or at least a start, when Gen AI hit, a couple years ago, it was pretty tidy, right? It's like I send a prompt, it's text, goes to my data center where I've got GPU processing, or it goes to the cloud where I've got GPU processing, and I act on my data, and then I get an amazing response back. Like that's like
yeah,
amateur hour, right?
yeah,
Like today,
yeah,
we're moving into a new space where, the network. I love the way you characterize it. It's going to become a data exchange fabric that's going to have to operate at real time speed globally,
yeah,
right? And that's going to
yeah,
be difficult for all of us to get our arms around, but we're going to have to figure this out. And it's going to require a new architecture. And then you also mentioned, Nick, like security.
yeah,
Security is also changing.
mm,
It's no longer I can put a nice tidy moat around my assets
yeah,
and be able to say, okay, anything that comes in or out of here, I'm going to inspect it. I'm going to, because I know that my assets are here. Security is going to be distributed. It's going to
yeah,
be everywhere. It's going to need to be wherever the data exchange is taking place, which is
yeah,
going to require, again, sort of thinking about the network. The network operators are going to have to become cyber experts in real time, because that cyber inspection is now going to happen everywhere. It's not going to
yeah.
happen just in my nice tidy moat.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I think that kind of reminds me of like one other a really important part of this data exchange around the security piece that you mentioned, Neil, and that the role of AI in that is really to facilitate and orchestrate the path for this data to follow. So, and I'm really thinking that we also need to have an industry conversation around Do we really need, kind of stateful routing like BGP? Do we go more to stateless, kind of routing? Because like if not, I'm not knocking BGP, and it'll still be around for a long time. But that database is like 30 years old. It's got millions of routes. It's like the convergence times get longer as the number of connections like increase. So we really need a different way in which paths for data to follow, and those paths should be determined not just on you know you know shortest hop, or where my nearest neighbor, but it really should factor in should latency, it should be the security posture, it should be consulting with a policy engine around guardrails, around compliance. Where is this data allowed to move? Where isn't it allowed to move? What is the kind of user experience that's required? And I think all of those need to be factored into paths for this exchange to create for that movement of data for the applications. I really think that's a very different way in which we've built infrastructure before, and I think I can see, like, even from our talk, you can see little pieces of this starting to emerge, right? The life cycle piece that we were just talking about to help automate a very manual, process. The whole routing piece, and how routing gets rethought, in this kind of exchange model is a conversation I really haven't seen yet, and I think that's something that we'll kind of start to maybe tee up at the AI networking summit, maybe not in the spring, but clearly in the fall timeframe.
No, I think you're exactly right. And as I reflect back on things like BGP, EIGRP,
Right. Yeah.
those are built for a different model, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm trying to get packets to move from point to point, and
Yeah.
I want to understand what's happening along that path. And then we've had amazing technologies that have emerged. Like Thousand Eyes. I'm a big fan of that because it lets you see the whole
Yeah.
path, whether I own it or not. Um, and that's amazing as well. But we're moving to a new thing that I don't think we've seen before, which is this kind of fabric, a data fabric, and exchange fabric. And I don't think we've seen the technology yet that's going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Um, it's I think bringing AI to that problem is going to be essential. Actually,
Yeah.
using AI for network discovery, being able to analyze the telemetry and all the different paths data could take, rerouting data automatically to a path that is available. Like, I don't think we've seen the protocols yet that are going to emerge that are going to help us solve that problem.
Yeah, but I totally agree. It reminds me of a song from Stevie Wonder. When you believe in things that you don't understand, you suffer. you know, I've got to, like, I'm thinking a little bit. It's like, wow, we know that these um, capabilities, are needed, but they're not there yet. And so we have to now be thinking about how quick they're going to come, and how do we get prepared, how do we design, for today, so I don't know. Let me I want to touch on one topic, and then actually I want to talk about what we're doing for the springtime, Neil. But what you're thinking around, what does a large enterprise kind of look like, like, kind of assuming that we get all this kind of technology put together, you know what does what do you think a large enterprise looks like, moving forward?
Mhm.
It's, yeah, I don't know. I have some thoughts, but, like, I hope that my question wasn't too vague,
No,
for you.
so I think, first of all, I think there's been a kind of a raging debate for a while about cloud versus on-prem, and it's
Mm,
like, that's the wrong question to me. You're going to
mm,
use both, right? You're going
yeah,
to be in multiple clouds. Also going to have your own data centers. Those things are going to have to work in concert to really
yeah,
solve the problems of the future, right? So you're not going to be cloud only. You're not going to be data center only. You're going to be, have compute and resources in a lot of places. And so
mm,
that's going to fundamentally change your architecture thinking. People have to access those applications wherever they live from wherever they are. And
Mm.
it's an any to any, right, world. And
Yeah.
most, it's amazing to me, Nick, like a lot of customers are still not, they're not set up for that. They were built for a world of, you know, I know where you're working, a workplace to my data center, and a hub and spoke
Right.
kind of, you know, architecture. And we're moving to a mesh
Yeah.
architecture really quickly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I think the security paradigm we talked about, you have to have security everywhere. There's no, if you do castle moat, that's going to fail, right? It's
Mm.
just not going to bring security assets where you're going to need them because of the any to any nature of the, you know, people to and things to applications, application to application, right?
Yeah.
Um, we're moving to a new world, so that's a tough answer. And I think, you know, what does it look like? I think the successful, you know, organizations are going to be those that who can get out of that sort of historical thinking of, you know what, I've got people, I know where they're working, and I'm trying to get them access to applications in my data center. Like the
Yeah.
quicker you can get out of that thinking and think about like, look, it's about connecting people and devices wherever they are to applications wherever they are, and
Yeah.
data
Mm.
movement between those
Yeah.
applications. So that's going to take a shift in thinking. It's amazing. I talk with customers every day, and just moving that thinking beyond, like, it's no longer a hub and spoke world. You know, you got to be thinking about mesh. It's
Yeah.
a global mesh of where are people, where are applications, and application to application, and solving that. So I think, first of all, that's it. Like, you've got to think about a new way of connecting people to data, people to applications. You got to think about a new way of securing those connections wherever they are. And again, no longer hub and spoke and choke point, you know, sort of firewall architecture. You got to think about a highly distributed security architecture. It's going to take new thinking. And so I think
Yeah.
those are a couple things that I think the successful, you know, organizations of the future are going to have to solve for, Nick. And we're working with customers every day. You know, I'm very hopeful because I look at, keep our customers are asking the right questions, right? They're
Mm.
asking the right questions. Like, I had this architecture for the past 25 years. Like, what does my new architecture need to look like?
Yeah.
And so I'm really hopeful, and it's a joy to work with our clients because they're asking the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah. That all makes perfect sense. I tell you, I think the two things that you hit on, and we just finished doing a poll of the community that we're going to be sharing at the summit. But the two impediments to change is trust of the technology and skill sets. Which really what um, you may not have, maybe the trust piece was kind of built into like the skill set piece of it, but it's like, yeah, there's a new way to think about this. There hasn't been kind of the aha moment in the industry where everyone is now focused on, okay, this is what we're all building towards. We know various attributes of what we need to build, um, but we haven't kind of like, when we moved from SNA to like TCP/IP, we had Ethernet, we had TCP/IP, we knew how to build that, we knew what the structures were, and then everyone can like build in earnest. And I think we're at the earlier stage in that new structure, because I think everything that you've been saying, Neil, and I think I've been kind of alluding to, is that the existing architectures that we have are too rigid, and they don't support the kinds of workflows and applications that are coming down the pike. And that automation is going to be really key, but we have to be able to control that automation to make sure it has the proper guardrails in it, so that corporations can create the business value that they need to create. They can compete and really be able to kind of take advantage of this this new technology. But I think like WWT is in this great position. You got this massive lab resources. You see lots of different customers, so you have this really great purview of what's happening in the industry, and able to kind of share that as a trusted partner during a really important transition period is a great place to be. So So I wanted to spend a little bit of time, talking about Neil, you've been a co-chair of the AI Networking Summit. I want to thank you, for that and all the work that you and also Brian, have been putting into the program. So I'm really excited that we got to put together a dedicated track for WWT. So I'm going to ask Andrea to put it up, and let's take just a few minutes and give everyone some highlights, of what we're going to be doing.
Yeah,
Oh,
first of all, I'm humbled, Nick. Like I love the ONUG forum because it's an amazing way to interact with our customers. I mean, there's conferences in the industry you can go to, of course, but what I love about ONUG is it's actually about it's a forum that's asking the right questions and seeking answers for our clients, right? And that's I don't see that at any other conference in the industry, which is why I'm so invested in what you're doing and the work that the team's doing, and I'm so humbled to
mm,
be part of that.
uh,
So the idea that we had for spring was let's bring AI education out there, um, all the way from what are the use cases people are doing, and what are we talking about, and we sort of gloss over that and cut straight to the let's build some GPUs in a data center, but the conversation with AI really starts with what am I trying to do? What am I
yeah,
trying to deliver from an outcome experience? So we thought we would structure a track around starting with that, starting with use cases and what are people what are we seeing? What are we seeing people trying to bring to life with AI? And then a little bit about agentic. Um,
yeah,
we say agentic, there's lots of articles on it, but what does that really mean?
yeah,
And so we're going to try to educate next on what are we talking about, the agentic AI. And Nick, you and I have been talking about it here. It's going to have tremendous impacts on the infrastructure, and so you really do, as a practitioner, you got to understand what does that mean, and be able to interpolate to what are the impacts going to be. Then there's a lot of the next is around like where am I going to run AI?
yeah,
Do I you leverage
mm,
cloud? Do I put it in my data center? Can I put it in my data center? What's it going to require? That's a huge challenge, right, for most of our clients. So we
yeah,
want to educate on that. Like the first step is understanding what the problem is, right? If I'm going to need 150 kilowatt racks or kilovolt racks, like I got to understand that first, right?
yeah,
And then I can make informed decisions about like even if I want to run this in my data center, can I? Or what is available to me? Can I leverage a colo provider? Can I leverage an as a service provider that is now being called neo cloud providers? Should
yeah,
I target there? Should I just build it in AWS or Google or Azure? Is that my option because I need access to it quickly, but I'm not going to be ready for that on premise. And then, another piece of that is then for the, sort of the practitioner, in IT is, okay, do I need to invest in InfiniBand? There's been a lot of,
yeah,
the early huge clusters you talked about, like thousands of GPUs. A lot of those have been built on InfiniBand technology. It just happens that it's a great technology to network together thousands of GPUs. But what if I don't have InfiniBand experts? What if I want to build this with Ethernet? Can I? So we did
yeah,
a huge study together with Cisco and NVIDIA and looked at those two options and said, can I run most AI? And it turns out Ethernet is fantastic for most AI, unless you're building a net new model and I need that last ounce of performance out of InfiniBand to thread data into the cluster. I can do just fine with Ethernet technology. And so we proved that
mm,
and we published a paper on that.
yeah. Don't give away
Then,
the ending.
yeah, exactly. And then, well, if I have a use case in mind, like what size cluster do I need? Do I need,
Yeah,
it's always in the news about people building tens of thousands of GPUs to solve some problem. But that's sort of a hyperscaler problem and a model builder problem. If I'm
yeah,
just trying to solve my use cases, what do I really need for AI infrastructure? And so we're providing some sizing. We've done tremendous studies and we're very fortunate to have this lab where we can do these studies to understand, like, okay, if you've got
mm,
this model with this many billion parameters, and you need to serve up this many users in this response time. What does that take for GPUs, right? Um, Deep fakes. Then we're going to turn a little bit to security.
Yeah.
Deep fakes, unfortunately, AI technology is both great to apply to security problems, but it's also being used by the bad actors to make much more sophisticated hacks. So we're going
Yeah.
to try to educate a little bit on that. How do you adopt AI responsibly? What do you need to think about for security and governance? Is there technology out there that can solve for deepfake and detect that automatically? We're working with a bunch of clients on that. And we're very fortunate. We're bringing, I think, actually the world's expert, Chris Roberts. We're bringing him
Mm.
out to ONIG to educate your clients, Nick, on like what is out there
Mm.
for the technology to secure this. And I
Yeah.
think it's hugely important right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Looking forward to to that session with Chris. And we have one last one: usage of AI.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and Todd is also Todd and Chris are colleagues. They work together again on being able to leverage and use AI responsibly. Right, what it's here to stay. We want to both take advantage of AI for the problems, but also be able to deliver AI to clients. And those things have to work in concert. And that's what Todd's going to talk about is really, how do I leverage AI both for security and intelligence and apply that to be able to deliver the AI experiences we want to, not let it stifle the industry just because we're concerned about the potential security threats. We've got to solve that to deliver
Yeah.
these amazing experiences. So that's what Todd's going to finish with.
Yeah. Great. Really super great track. Neil, thanks so much to you and the WWT, folks. Like, we're honored, to have you be part of the program and to have such a great contribution. Just for everyone like who's listening. So those are dedicated sessions, dedicated tracks for WWT. There's about, I think, 55 to 60 sessions in total. So there's a lot, in these 2 days, but those are really dedicated, really focused, and it brings out kind of the best, thinking around WWT as, kind of leveraging all the, the touch points that it has like in the industry and brings them, over to the AI networking summit. So thank you, Neil.
Oh, of course, and I'm humbled, Nick. Like I'm so invested in your forum and ONIG because like I
Oh,
said, I think there's conferences aplenty out there, but a lot of them are like, look at what I've done, look what I can sell you.
yeah.
What I love about ONIG is it's asking questions, right? It's education, it's solving the problems that haven't been solved yet, and I have found like that's really unique in the industry. So I'm very humbled to be part of it, Nick, and thank you very much for allowing us
Uh,
to help bring this kind of education to your clients.
Awesome, and thank you for those kind words. Yeah, I think it's we have a lot of conferences in the industry that are run by the vendor community, and they're very important. It's a great place for customers to be able to gather and ecosystems to be able to gather, and so those are important. Yeah, we think that what we're doing is pretty different. It's really around peer groups and around kind of it's bridging the gap between kind of buyers and suppliers and helping the industry move forward through kind of having those peer conversations and peer discussions. So thanks for being a big part of that, Neil. And this was really a lot of fun. I had such a great time chatting with you. I think we touched on so many really great points, and also we got a great overview and on what to expect on the WWT track. So, Neil, any final words?
Look, I think the sooner that you get educated about AI, the better. Like we're all going to have to embrace this. This is not a fad that's going away. It's
Mm,
going to change all of our lives. And I'm also reminded of, I always use this quote from I think Gene Sun, who is attributed to this a FedEx CISO, and he
yeah,
said, it's not going to be AI that replaces people's jobs. It's going to be people that know how to use AI are going to replace your job, right? I love that
yeah,
from Gene.
yeah,
A big admirer, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in that that statement. Like, we all have to figure out how to leverage AI. It's not going away. The sooner you embrace it, figure it out, support your organization, the better. And so that's my thought, Nick, is like, you got to embrace this, right? You got to become AI literate.
That's awesome. And also Neil, like Gene is coming on the pod in about 2 hours.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's funny. Yeah. Great. Great transition. Awesome. Hey, Neil, thank you so much. And to the entire WWT team, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Can't wait.
So, yeah. Awesome. Great. Thanks, Neil. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for plugging in.